Hello. After our August recess, welcome back to episode 168 of the Go Beyond Disruption podcast, Disrupting Yourself, Going Solo, the First Month. From the heart of the City of London, I'm Kyle Hannon, and this is a podcast from the Association of International Certified Professional Accountants, and it's the Go Beyond Disruption podcast. Last episode, we talked about the concept of a phenomenon called the Great Resignation. We introduced our forthcoming mini-series called Disrupting Yourself, Going Solo. So this episode, now that we're back after our August break, we're bringing you the first of those. The last episode of the podcast every month will feature one of these conversations about career transformation, about moving from being an employee to being, something else, either a solo consultant or setting up your own small practice or finding your own self-directed opportunities in what's becoming known as the gig economy. Each of these special episodes will be designed to mimic a sample journey. It's not advice, it's not typical, it's just a sample. The journey that takes you from working for someone else through to working for yourself. These episodes will go out at the end of every month until the end of Q1 2022. So we're looking at March next year. Each of them will look at some of the milestones you can expect to reach in that time. We'll every month find ourselves looking forward to where you could expect to be 1 month after that episode. We'll also look back at the previous month's episode to see how you've tracked your own progress on this journey to solo. We're doing that with my guest, David Peters. David, for those who may not have heard of you before, may not have caught the last episode, tell us a bit about yourself.
I am a tax practitioner. I'm also a financial advisor, and I do a lot of different things. I do a little bit of tax preparation and tax planning. I do a lot of work with individuals, small businesses, trusts, estates, and kind of whatever else I can get my hands on. I also manage money. I do that through Carroll Financial Associates in Charlotte, North Carolina. I partner with them on the investing side. And then I also help broker insurance policies for folks when they need it, life insurance, small business insurance, health insurance, things like that. And then in addition to doing all of that, I also am a national continuing education instructor for Kaplan, for Surgent, and the AICPA. I've had the pleasure of writing several courses for the AICPA and a lot of stuff in the area of small business. And so this topic of going out on your own is one that is near and dear to my heart. This is something that I think is a great topic. I have spent a good bit of my career in startups. Before I went out on my own, I worked for several startup entities. I was the first CFO of Compare.com, which is a price comparison website for auto insurance rates, sort of like Kayak for auto insurance, if you want to think about it that way. I was also one of the first folks at Elephant Auto Insurance, which is a 6-state auto insurance carrier that was started in Richmond, Virginia. And so I did that for a little while as well. And I also, a lot of my clients these days are folks that are just kind of getting started. And they are going through a lot of the same things that are probably going through your mind as well. I mean, there's kind of something inside of them that just says, you know what? I can't go any further without giving this a shot. I have to do it.
Absolutely right, because we talked about a new phenomenon called the Great Resignation last time. That was in episode 167. You mentioned the last episode that we kind of introduced this whole mini-series. For someone who may not have heard of the Great Resignation, just remind us what that is and why now is suddenly the time for these conversations about going solo.
Well, so the Great Resignation is this term that we have given to the massive amount of people right now that are changing jobs. So, a lot of this is piggybacking off of the pandemic. People were afraid to move jobs. They were afraid to get out into other careers. They were afraid to go out into the job market because I think, everybody was just trying to kind of hold on to what they had. Well, now People have seen a little bit of daylight. And so because of that, now they're starting to look around a little bit. And as a part of that process, some people have said, you know what? Hey, I don't want to jump on with another firm. I want to do my own thing. I want to try going out on my own. And I think that the Great Resignation has really jump-started this idea because people have had time to think. They've had time to think about what do they want to do next in their career. And I think that for a lot of folks, they've said, hey, I want to make that leap. I want to go out on my own, and I want to see if I can do it. And again, I think that is a leap. It is something that is not an easy thing to do.
So let's set the scene. What's the typical scenario that we think we could be looking at? Where could the person we're talking about, the professional, where could they be now? And why could this person whose sample journey that we'll be looking at over the next few months, why would they be considering going solo?
I think that it's not unusual at this point, and I guess, Kyle, I'm not really painting a really, happy picture at the moment, but hold on, we'll get there. I think there's a little bit of a time where people have kind of this awakening in a way that they kind of say, oh my gosh, what have I done? They make the decision to go out on their own and they're excited about it. And then one of the first things that happens is they find themselves sitting by themselves, kind of contemplating what they just did. And they're like, oh my gosh, what have I done? I know that for me personally, I distinctly remember the first business day right after I had made that decision to go out on my own. I'm sitting in my living room and I'm like, okay, what now? What do I do? And that is pretty common. And the first thing that needs to happen, and really the topic that we wanted to get into today, was we need to start developing partnerships and raising awareness. That's really step number one, is that kind of once we've made this decision, we need to start telling people about the service or the product that we are working on now. Logistics are important. No doubt about it. We need to make sure that we register businesses and things like that. We need to make sure that we have licenses, those types of things. But none of that can necessarily take a back seat to making sure that we're telling people what we're doing. We have to tell people about what we're doing. Otherwise, how are they going to know?
Sure. Now, my question about that is going solo and having something to communicate to your network seems to be something which fits more if you're in mid to late stages of a career anyway. Because if people are just starting off in their career, it may not be a great time to consider going solo if you've just been working as an accountant or a finance professional just for a couple of years. Or am I wrong? Is there a stage in your career that going solo would never be a good idea? Perhaps you've not yet built up that network you were talking about. Or is this something that almost anyone can do? Do we always have a network?
Yeah, I think that that's a great question. I don't know that there is such a thing as perfect timing. I don't know that there is kind of the perfect time where stars are all going to align and it is kind of the perfect time for you to go out on your own. And I think that that is actually what I hear from other people who have kind of had this thought. They're like, hey, I'm kind of thinking about going off and kind of doing my own thing. But if they're waiting for the stars to align perfectly, if they are waiting for everything to be in place, if they're waiting to feel completely 100% comfortable starting their own business, they're probably never going to do it. Because the reality is, I don't think that there is such a thing as perfect timing. I think that, you kind of just got to go with, hey, I'm passionate about this and I need to try this. Otherwise, I'm going to wonder to myself if I could have ever gone into business for myself.
Surely the moment you see a need, that informs your decision to go solo. And of course, seeing a perceived need is something that informs the kind of service that you will then be communicating to that network you're talking about. Isn't that the case?
That's absolutely correct. I mean, if you look at a perceived need, something that people, that you feel like you could improve, something that you feel like that could really be a benefit to other people, I mean, that is certainly going to prod you along to make this decision to go out on your own. You talked a little bit about your network, and certainly, if you have years and years of experience in a particular industry, you may have a pretty good network already. But I think it's important to find ways to get yourself in front of people. It's important to figure out how to brand yourself, not just to the network that already exists, but to new people as well. And so I think especially when you first get started, especially in that first month time frame, which is really what we're talking about here today, it's important to just find ways to tell people what you're doing, even if it's not necessarily in a formal business setting. And for a lot of people, I think that makes them uncomfortable. So I want to put a little bit of meat on the bone, as my grandmother would say, and just make sure that we kind of understand what I mean by that. I'm not talking about hard marketing. I'm not talking necessarily about going door to door and knocking kind of one right after another and telling them what you are doing. That's not really what I mean. What I mean is making people aware of what you're doing in kind of the everyday conversations that you have. I'm sure that you can identify with this. I mean, usually right after you meet someone, the next question that they ask you is they say, okay, what do you do? Our occupation is a part of our identity,
But then my question is, you talked about building bridges in terms of where you're going next. What about looking backwards? Because all of us, as we go solo, there's the journey out of where we are. And we have to be careful. It's one thing to explain to people what you're doing based on where you're going next. But how do you make plans for your exit from where you already are? How do you tell people? How do you inform your colleagues? How do you make sure while you're building bridges for where you're going next, how do you make sure that you're not burning them from where you've come?
I think that's an excellent question and a very important thing to do the best we can on. You need to make sure that your exit from your current employer is very important. You need to tell people that you're thankful for their time, that you have learned something while you've been working there. You don't want colleagues or other people thinking that you don't want to leave them with a negative taste in their mouth, because that can only hurt you. And I am increasingly aware, the more I get to travel and talk to practitioners all over the country when I'm teaching for the AICPA and when I'm doing other things, as a practitioner, I'm very aware of how small the world is. It really is. And I never think it's a good idea to, quote unquote, take a shot on the way out, of a place that you're working at and things like that. I just, that's not good. There's no way that helps you in the future, and it's not necessary. And you really shouldn't do that. It's, I am very much a fan of trying to leave well, and especially if you've had a good experience at your previous employer. I mean, a lot of times when people go out on their own, it's not necessarily discontentment with their current employer. It's just, again, it's that drive, it's that passion, it's that thing that kind of just inside of us that says, you know what, I got to try going out on my own, because otherwise I'm going to wonder if I ever could have done it.
Yeah, and with the greater mobility of the workforce today, it's very likely that many of your colleagues, some of your reports, perhaps some of your upper management, your leadership in the company that you are moving away from may at some stage in the future be going solo themselves. And then they may be potential business partners, they may be clients. So that's also important.
Correct.
So what you've now done is you've talked about making the decision. So you said you need to make sure that you think more about the needs that you will be filling, the service that you'll be offering. Don't think so much about, is this the right time for me? Concentrate on the opportunity. That's the perceived need you were talking about and how well you could fill it and share that with people. You talked about one of the things being a willingness to risk a lot and give up that safety of corporate life. And we'll talk about that in a second, because that is quite a disruption. And then you talked about making plans for your exit. That is to leave where you are at the moment. Don't burn bridges from where you've come just because you're starting to think about building them in the direction of where you're going next. And that going next, of course, requires a business plan. And that's just a basic idea of what you're going to be doing and how you're going to be doing it. So let's then look at the disruption we'd expect. And we've talked about that already. It is incredibly disruptive from a personal standpoint.
Yep.
You mentioned this a number of times, that massive disruption, that loss of stability, I suppose. You've got a lot that you'd be giving up when you go out on your own. The full-time job, you've got benefits, all that kind of stuff. It sounds scary, but is it? I mean, what can you replace that with? And bear in mind, we are talking about this from the perspective of the US, but in pretty much any developed economy, when you work for someone, chances are you get a more regular salary than you do when you're working for yourself.
Correct.
It might also be a considerably different size salary, because if your practice is successful, your solo consultancy does well, you could find yourself earning a lot more. But then you've got to think, well, the personal disruption comes with having to do your own tax and all that type of stuff. And I think that is pretty global. So
Correct.
Talk us through that conventional disruption and whether we should be worried about it, and if we are, how we get ready for it.
I think you hit the nail on the head. It's scary. I mean, I'm not going to really sugarcoat it to the folks that are listening here, to my colleagues that are listening. It is scary, and the reliability of a regular salary that you're getting, every couple of weeks or whatever it is, that is going away. And again, most startup businesses don't make money straight out of the gate. I don't think, that's, I don't think that that's a big secret. If it is, I guess we just ruined it. Most of the time, most companies don't make money sort of straight out of the gate. And so there's going to be a little bit of time there where you may have to supplement your style of living, some other way. And it can be very scary. But what do you sort of supplement it with? Well, you supplement it with passion. There has to be just an unbelievable passion. There has to be an unbelievable drive. There's not sort of a way where going out on your own that it's ever going to be kind of the perfect time. It is going to be disruptive to your personal life. I would also say, though, too, another sort of common disruption in all of this is the relationships that you're building. Relationships by their very nature, building relationships and reaching out to people and trying to make new connections by its very nature is disruptive. You're disrupting what people normally do. New ideas, even if they're good, are disruptive. When I was the CFO of Compare.com, I mean, we were trying to get a U.S. consumer to look at buying auto insurance on a price comparison website. Now, in the UK, that was something that that they were very used to. I mean, Kyle, I think you can attest to that. I mean, I think
definitely. Oh yeah, they're everywhere. So many price comparison websites. So for us, that sounds like a no-brainer. But you're saying that is not the same way it's responded to globally, right?
It's not the same way that it's responded to globally. So we were trying to retrain a consumer. And that's a hard thing to do. So by its very nature, a new product, a new service is going to be disruptive. And reaching out to people and saying, here is, maybe some ways that we can work together. That's disruptive. You're going to have to go to coffee meetings and lunch meetings and things like that take you out of your comfort zone. You're offering them a new solution to their problem. You're advertising. Advertising is disruptive because it disrupts the way that people sort of go about their day to day. But I think that that's really important, at least in the early stages, is just trying to create a sense of here I am and here is what I'm doing. And you don't necessarily have to be real formal about it, but you got to be purposeful in telling people about it, I think.
When you talk about making a plan, there are all kinds of plans you can make, but you can't think about doing anything without one of those plans, a path to follow. And you talked about disruptive approaches. And I know that what I've seen is people who are thinking of going solo, what they don't do is quit.
Right.
What they do is they kind of interphase themselves out. It's a transition rather than a resignation. They will say, right, can I go from a 5 days a week to a 2 day a week?
Right.
And what they do is go from full-time to part-time. So it's a slower transition.
Correct.
You talked about that stability. It's slightly less stability, but it does give you a little bit of a buffer. So it may be something that if the opportunity offers itself, go from full-time to part-time, and then those other days of the week, focus on building that brand, building those bridges. And this is one of those new disruptions that I know we talked about, because we know the conventionally disruptive effect of going solo means loss of stability.
Right.
You've given up the stability of a full-time job with benefits. But the new disruptions that we're seeing are caused by the pandemic. And this is something that we never have talked about until kind of a year and a half ago. What are some of those new disruptions, and how do they affect this journey from where we are to where we'll be as a solo professional?
So I think that there's a lot of things that are coming out of the pandemic that I think do present a lot of opportunities. I think that one of the main ones is just that I think a lot of folks are realizing that business doesn't necessarily always have to be done face to face. That may be what we would prefer. But I think that after a year and a half or so of Zoom meetings and phone calls and emails as being kind of the only ways that you can really communicate with your clients, I think one thing that has come out of that is that people have realized that you don't necessarily have to do business face to face. And I'm not sure that before the pandemic, our thinking was really kind of pointed in that direction. I know that for a lot of us that are in the financial advising profession, I know that a lot of us really struggled with the idea of, doing Zoom meetings as kind of being our primary way of meeting with people. And but we're finding out, again, after 18 months or so of doing this, that people are more adaptable and more amenable to that way of doing business than maybe we initially thought. So I think that that's maybe an opportunity there. I think that there is probably some opportunities in the sense that in a lot of ways, geography doesn't matter as much anymore. We can do business with people across the country. We can have the opportunity to interact with clients and to be a part of groups that are across the country and in some cases across the world, and without thinking much of it anymore. I distinctly remember when I was an intern. I was an intern at a small accounting firm that was just north of Chicago. And I remember during tax season, we used to have clients. This was like, kind of before the internet was really a thing. I mean, I think we had like one email account for the entire firm, and we used to have clients that would mail their tax return information to us, and we would put together the return, and then we would print it out on paper, and the preparer would sign off on it and send it back out. We would mail it back out to the client. It used to be that geography was really a barrier to doing business. And now, I mean, the reason why we kind of chuckle at that kind of stuff is because geography is becoming less and less of a barrier. It opens up your ability to do business with folks across the country. It also gives you the ability to partner with firms across the country and employ people.
But sure, if geography is less of an issue, doesn't that also mean that whereas your partners and your clients may be from everywhere, so may your competitors be coming at you from pretty much anywhere? Is that also a potential danger?
Correct. I think it absolutely is. I mean, I think that is something to consider as well, is that there are people in your area of expertise, your product, your service, that maybe weren't necessarily on your radar before, but now they need to be. In a lot of cases, I think businesses during the pandemic, I think that they realized that there were firms and other companies competing against them that they didn't even really know existed prior to that. To your point, Kyle, I mean, it has maybe caused some increased competition, but I also think too that there's probably also some opportunities out there that maybe didn't exist before. Ultimately, what we need to figure out at this point is how can we compete? So given the competitive landscape, given the fact that, maybe geography is less of an issue, given the fact that clients are maybe more amenable to technology, more tuned in to technology than maybe they've ever been, where does that leave us? How can we sort of leverage some of those things? And I think that it's important to, at that point, to figure out what we can be as a business that didn't exist before. If you can't match other companies that are out there, if you can't match your competitors in terms of speed or in terms of kind of their ability to get to things to the customer, because that's another thing. People want things that are more personalized these days, that are more specific to their needs these days than they probably have ever wanted things in the past. It's a very personalized market. Even in financial services, we want very personalized answers to a lot of our needs. If you can't be faster than the competition, maybe you can. If you can, then maybe that's your opportunity. If you can't be faster, though, then you probably need to be different. You probably need to offer something that people didn't have before. If you're offering outsourced CFO services, as an example, so chief financial officer services, head of finance type of services, that's sometimes goes by different names, part-time head of finance, or somebody will serve as kind of the leader of the finance department but not on an everyday basis for several companies. That whole idea, let's say that you're doing that. If you're offering sort of this outsourced CFO services, you need to figure out, okay, well, how can I do this? What can I offer that is different from everybody else that's offering outsourced CFO services? There's a lot of firms that do it. How can I necessarily be different from what they already have? That's the challenge. Maybe I say, okay, in addition to doing these, kind of the normal things that a CFO would do, maybe I also agree that, maybe I have a background in technology. So maybe I am going to also offer some advice on IT security. Okay, or something like that. So I'm using sort of my unique talents to make my product better than what other folks would find in the market. I'm not faster necessarily, but I may be able to offer something that is different. I think that is something else too, is that, we got to figure out where we can compete. And I think in that, in that first month, that's really the important thing. I'm trying to raise awareness. I'm trying to tell people what I'm doing. And in that process, I'm further studying where the opportunities really are. I think that is really where you're spending your time in that first month. So I think that's, kind of where I see that first month. That first month, it's important. And because you know what? Relationship building takes time. It's not going to, move, real super fast, probably. You're going to be talking to a lot of people, and it's not unusual, I think, for a lot of folks, especially in that first month or so, to kind of feel a little stuck. But the thing is that you got to keep at it, because again, the partnerships that you build, the opportunities that you see during that time is going to set you up well going forward.
The good news is that this is something we'll be concentrating on in a month's time, where we come back with our next episode in this series. And that will be at the end of September 2021. That episode will be titled 1 Month in Developing Partnerships, Raising Awareness. We're talking about branding yourself, your product, and what makes you distinct in more detail there. So you've indicated that once we've disrupted our professional life and personal to an extent by deciding to go solo, we know we need a good business plan. We need to think about scenario and contingency planning. How do we deal with these disruptions as we start to track the sample path to going solo?
We need to continue to kind of keep that passion going. And ultimately, we need to be kind of okay with it if it doesn't go our way, too. I mean, that's the tough one to admit to ourselves, I think. But really what kind of keeps us going, especially in that first month, oh my goodness, it has to be our passion because we have so many things working against us. The statistics are not in our favor. The safety is not in our favor. Our colleagues may be looking at us and saying, why are you leaving this job, man? You have it good. And from that point, that's where our passion has to kind of step in and carry us through. Otherwise, why would we do it?
Then someone's going to turn around and say, well, with all these disruptions, and if you factor in the pandemic and the fact that so many other people are going down this potential solo route as well, that does make the decision to go out on one's own sound very much like a kind of a kooky idea.
Crazy.
But as you were saying, there are plenty of good reasons for it. You've spotted an opportunity. You feel you're ready for it. You've got the network. Also, we seem to, once the pandemic has suddenly shown us that we can be, in many ways, much more resilient. We can work in different ways. We can achieve a lot without having to go to an office all the time. So actually, we can be pretty resilient when it comes to working without the usual resources of the office and the massive teams physically around us. We're kind of getting our heads into that space without realizing it, aren't we? So we're probably readier than we realize.
I think that's very true. I think for a lot of us, working from home and not sort of having our, kind of normal colleagues and folks in our business life kind of around physically all the time, I think in on some level has made it so that we look at now as that maybe the decision to go out on our own is not necessarily being that far of a reach at this point, or at least maybe it feels closer. I think to your point, it feels closer than maybe it did previously.
Now that we look back at what could be lying ahead, what are some typical timeframes or milestones that you suggest people could be considering on the sample journey to going solo in the course of the first month between making the decision and starting the whole ball rolling? And where could they expect to be in a month's time, just so that when we come back next time, we look back and go, okay, 1 month in, here's where you could be now?
Everybody's going to be a little bit different, but I do think that what you should really sort of focus on kind of in that first month is, again, just trying to get in front of as many people as you can. And so I'll share when I made the decision to go into this current business that I'm working in now, and I made that decision to go out on my own. My success was not necessarily the monetary success. I mean, it's, again, most businesses, they don't make money sort of straight out of the barrel. So we need to find ways to achieve success, take steps towards where we want to be, without necessarily focusing in just purely on dollars. And so I looked at it as I kept track of my number of contacts. And so a successful day for me, especially in that first month or so, was, okay, how many people did I get in front of today and tell somebody about my business? Not formal sales presentations per se, but how many people did I mention when I was getting my, coffee in the morning, or when I was out to lunch in the afternoon, or when I was, taking my kids to football practice, how many people did I have a chance to tell them what I was doing? And because, again, you need to find ways to sort of spread the word. And the only way that people are going to know what you're doing is if you tell them.
Because you may be the world's best expert, but unless you're able to talk to other people about your expertise, it's not going to reach them. My guest, David Peters, talking about disrupting yourself going solo the first month. We'll make sure that we have a couple of links to resources and the show notes, of course, right there at your fingertips in your podcast app. You can view them really easily. Click on the episode's info icon in your app. You can use your smartphone, your tablet, or open the episodes in your computer's web browser. You'll find everything right there. And you can also browse the AICPA website, the portal future.aicpa.org. That's future.aicpa.org for courses, webinars, and other professional development resources focused on small business and all that type of stuff too. A useful mix of free and paid for resources. So go there, have a browse. David, before I let you go, do you have any resources or suggestions for places that people can go online to do some of their own prep if they are considering going solo?
If you're looking to go solo, I think that there is a lot of good stuff that Kyle already mentioned on the AICPA's website. In the United States, the Small Business Administration is a great place to go to look and get sort of free resources that are out there. So those are both good spots. Also, some of the courses that are out there from the AICPA. So the Small Business Advisor Program, which is a course that I teach, is one that might be helpful to folks that are looking to go out on their own, especially if you're looking to try to understand sort of the financial and tax impacts of going out on your own and some of the things that go into that decision. So those are all good resources for sure.
Great. And of course, we'll include UK, EU, and other links to the CIMA resources that you can find here, including some of the gig economy content, which may be interesting. Thank you so much to my guest, David Peters. And of course, thank you for listening. Wherever you've joined us from, if you've enjoyed the episode, go share it with a colleague, a friend, go tell someone about it. We'd love to know what you think, and you can tell us by emailing us via the feedback link in our show notes or by leaving a comment under our webcast or our podcasts, wherever you find us on the World Wide What's-It. From the AICPA and CIMA office in the heart of London's financial district, I'm Kyle Hannon. We'll be back soon with more conversations that help you and your profession to go beyond disruption. Till next time, keep listening and keep safe. Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Beyond Disruption, brought to you by the Association of International Certified Professional Accountants. Learn more about today's topic at AICPA-CIMA.com/disruption. This podcast is designed to provide illustrative information with respect to the subject matter covered and does not represent an official opinion or position of the Association of International Certified Professional Accountants or any of its subsidiaries or affiliates. It is provided with the understanding that the association, its affiliates, and subsidiaries are not engaged in rendering legal, accounting, or other professional services. If such advice or expert assistance is required, the services of a competent professional person should be sought. The association, its subsidiaries, and affiliates make no representations, warranties, or guarantees as to and assume no responsibility for the content or application of the material contained herein and expressly disclaim all liability for such damages arising out of the use of, reference to, or reliance on such material.